Hi, my name is Courtney, and today I'm going to be talking to you about the toy store activity that I conducted for my sociology class. So, a toy store activity is basically when you go to your local store and you go to the toy section and you analyze each aisle by how gendered it is. So, is this aisle dedicated to boys? Is it dedicated to girls? Is it a little bit of mixture in there? It's also important to look at the language used to sell the toys and the colors used and everything like that. So for my activity, I went to the Target on Battleground and Lawndale Drive because it's the closest one to campus. Luckily, my friend Josh decided to drive me because I had no other way of getting there at the time. So when we got to the store, we immediately went to the back, which is where the toys are in that particular Target. I was looking at the aisle and kind of trying to decide where to start, so I chose to skip the first few aisles because they were toys that were dedicated to babies and any age below the toddler age, and I noticed just from a few glances that they seemed to be pretty gender neutral and mostly just focused on the growth and the learning and the development of the babies instead of this is for boys and this is for girls. I think it became more gendered in the toddler section, so that's where I decided to conduct my experiment. The toddler sections and above. So I basically knew what I was expecting to see. Once I got to Target, I mean, if I could probably go, without having been to a store recently, I could, tell you about what would be on each aisle. There's usually aisles for girls, aisles for boys, and then, the aisles for girls has dolls, and the aisles for boys have cars, and I don't need to go to a toy store to tell you that. However, I proceeded with the analysis and the experiment anyways. So, in order to effectively analyze each aisle, I decided to just start with the first one that had toddler-age toys and above and just go through one by one. I brought my notebook and pens to Target with me because I didn't want to have to be working from my memory when I got back to the car, when I got back to my apartment. I just wanted to make sure I wrote down the important things so that when I got home, I could effectively analyze the situation. So, I actually got a few strange looks from the employees, wondering why I was walking around their toy aisles making notes in my notebook, but they didn't confront me directly. So I took notes on the toys. I took notes what toys were on each aisle, what colors were used, what language was used to sell these toys, what gender they seemed to be directed towards, the diversity amongst the toys, so with dolls, how many races of dolls do they have, the different careers that the Barbie dolls grow up to be, different things like that I tried to focus on to see how gendered these aisles were. So, in order to best describe my analysis to you, I'm just going to take it aisle by aisle like I did while I was conducting the analysis. So, the first aisle I went down, it immediately appeared to be a girl aisle. It was very pink. I don't think there were many items on the aisle that weren't pink. So this aisle was dedicated to dolls that were for toddler-age children, toddler-age little girls. So the first thing I noticed about the dolls is that they were very white. There were not a lot of options for people of color. There was one option for people of color, and it was representative of African Americans, which is great, but they didn't have any other people of color represented in these baby dolls. It was either black or white. There wasn't any other options, which is very exclusive of a lot of people and a lot of children who won't have a doll to play with that they can relate to in their own lives. The second thing that I noticed about the baby dolls is that they were all baby girls. There were no baby dolls that were specifically a baby boy, and it just made me think that there could be a little boy out there who wants to play with dolls even though society tells him that he shouldn't do that, and yet he won't be able to because he won't be able to if he wants to pretend to raise a baby boy because the Target near his home doesn't have it. And that just stuck out to me, that all of the dolls were girls. So the second and third aisles I went down also were pretty full of a variety of dolls. These dolls were well above the toddler age, and they were more like fashion dolls and Barbie dolls and Disney dolls, and there were a few superhero dolls and then some dolls that I had never heard of before. They're called STEAM dolls, or STEAM dolls. This stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, Arts, and Mathematics. So these dolls are there to encourage little girls to look into studies and professions that they wouldn't normally, because society tells them that they can't be a scientist or they can't be an engineer or a mathematician, which I actually thought was really awesome. I was actually really surprised to find these dolls there at Target. However, I did notice that these dolls were also still very white. I can't remember the specifics if there were any people of color representative, but I knew even the ones that were extremely whitewashed, as we saw with the other dolls previously. Another thing I noticed with these dolls was that all of their outfits were the same. They were all wearing short skirts and nice shirts and jewelry and makeup, and to me this was just sending the message that if you want to care about science and math, that's fine, but you also still have to look pretty, as society expects you to do. This seemed to be the case with all of the other types of dolls that they had on this aisle, including Barbie dolls. So the next three aisles that I analyzed were aisles that predominantly were geared towards little boys. So the first aisle was completely Legos. Both sides of the aisles just was full of Legos. And for me, growing up as a child, Legos were Legos. They were pretty gender neutral. They weren't themed based on the recent movies and TV shows that were out. Anyone could play with them. It didn't really matter. Well, all of these Legos were very themed. They on TV shows and movies, and they were all geared towards little boys. There was about 1/4 of the Lego aisle that was dedicated to girl Legos, and these Legos were promoting themes of friendship and love and cooking and princesses and, like I said, everything that society expects little girls to be. While the boy Legos were promoting building and driving cars and being architects and being these powerful things that girls weren't allowed to be according to the Legos. So the next two aisles were completely cars. Cars, everything. Cars, trucks, Hot Wheels, different tracks for the different kinds of cars and trucks and Hot Wheels. Neither of these two aisles that were dedicated solely to cars and trucks for little boys had any cars and trucks that were inviting to little girls. None of them seemed to give off a appearance that would make a little girl who is controlled by society's standards saying, oh, you have to play with pink things and sparkly things and frilly things. It was all very centered around little boys. So the last aisle I went down was very gender neutral appearing from the outside, and so I realized that upon closer inspection it definitely was not as gender neutral as I had originally thought. This aisle had a lot of beach toys shovels and pails and kites and bubbles and beach balls or bouncy balls, and each one of these items was either princess or superhero. There was really not a lot of in between. So when someone goes down that aisle, they have to choose, do I want a princess kite or a superhero kite? And society expects that the little girls will pick the princess kites and the little boys will pick the superhero kites. As I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, I didn't think I would be very surprised by anything that I found in the toy section at Target. And besides the Steam dolls that I had never really heard of before, I wasn't surprised by anything that I found in the toy section. It was exactly like I expected it to be. There'd be aisles dedicated to girls, aisles dedicated to boys, some aisles with a little bit of in between, but those aisles were still very gendered in the products that they sold. I think that my lack of surprise is indicative of how far we still have to go as a society to become more equal in our genders.